The simulation chamber hummed with a violent, oscillating frequency that rattled the reinforced viewing glass. Inside the arena, the gravity well had been dialed up to a bone-crushing intensity, a force that should have reduced any standard biological entity to a paste on the pristine floor. Yet the blurred figure in the center was not collapsing. It was accelerating. Sergeant Vrox gripped the observation console, his chitinous claws gouging deep grooves into the hardened polymer. He watched in stunned silence as the recruit launched a spinning kick that shattered the target drone into shrapnel. The maneuver required a torque that would snap a Xylian leg like a dry twig, but the human landed softly, bouncing on the balls of his feet. This was not just endurance, it was a biologically unfair advantage. The recruit wiped sweat from his brow and looked up at the control booth with a grin that bordered on predatory. To this species, gravity is just a suggestion to them. 3 hours earlier, the day had promised to be a routine exercise in humiliation. Vrox stood before the intake line at Orbital Bastion 9, his chest plating gleaming under the harsh hangar lights. He was a veteran of the border skirmishes, a towering mass of muscle and armor, often referred to by the softer species as one of the Space Orcs of the sector. Today, he had a fresh batch of recruits sent by the Galactic Council, a diverse mix of avians, molluscoids, and one bipedal mammal from a newly integrated system. The file designated the species as Terran, hailing from a world categorized in the deep archives as a Deathworlder-class planet. Vrox dismissed the tag as a clerical error. The creature, Recruit Miller, looked pathetic. He had no exoskeleton, no redundant organs, and his skin looked dangerously permeable. They were walking tanks made of soft flesh, or so the rumors claimed, but looking at Miller, Vrox saw only a liability. "Step onto the plates," Vrox barked, his voice amplified across the training deck. "We start at standard galactic gravity. If you feel faint, raise a limb. I will not stop until I see vomit or unconsciousness." The recruits shuffled onto the gravity plating. Vrox keyed the sequence, bringing the artificial gravity up to 0.8 g, the comfortable norm for most civilized worlds. Immediately, the avian recruits sagged, their hollow bones straining under the sudden weight. A silicon-based recruit from Gliese sounded like grinding gears as it struggled to remain upright. Vrox paced the line, waiting for the inevitable collapse. He stopped in front of Miller. The human was standing at ease, looking bored. He wasn't straining. He wasn't even breathing hard. In fact, Miller was lightly bouncing on his heels, a display of human ingenuity applied to simple biomechanics utilizing elastic potential energy where others used brute force. "Is there a problem, recruit?" Vrox growled, leaning down to intimidate the small mammal. Miller blinked, looking genuinely confused. "No, Sergeant. I was just wondering when you were going to turn it on." Vrox narrowed his eyes. The sensors indicated the deck was active. The plating was generating a downward force that mimicked the pull of a standard habitable moon. "It is on," Vrox hissed. Miller looked down at his boots, then back up. "Oh, my apologies, Sergeant. It feels a bit floaty. I thought the system was lagging. Standard G feels like the moon to me." Irritation flared in Vrox's primary neural cluster. He marched back to the console. The HFY forums on the localized net often exaggerated stories about the Terran spirit, but Vrox dealt in hard data. However, he had failed to check the specific comparative planetology metrics for Earth. He didn't realize that while the galactic standard was calculated for lower density worlds, Earth churned at a heavy 9.8 milliars/2. "Let's see how you handle the challenge," Vrox muttered, his finger hovering over the dial. He pushed the slider past the safety markers, aiming for 1.5 g. The hum of the generator deepened. The avian recruits were instantly pinned to the floor, squawking for a medic. The Gliese recruit deactivated its servos to prevent structural failure. In the center of the groaning, flattened squad, Miller cracked his neck. Then, to Vrox's absolute bewilderment, the human dropped to the floor and began performing push-ups. "Clear the deck," Vrox roared, his command overriding the groans of the incapacitated recruits. "Medical teams, extract the failures. Recruit Miller, you remain." The hangar bay cleared with the efficiency of a frantic evacuation drill. Once the blast doors sealed, isolating the human in the center of the vast, sterile arena, Vrox turned back to the controls. His pride was stinging, a sensation he despised more than shrapnel wounds. This was supposed to be a lesson in Galactic Council superiority, not a gym session for a bored primate. "You want resistance, Earthborn? Let us test the limits of your Terran spirit." Vrox bypassed the safety protocols, his claws dancing over the haptic interface. He slammed the gravity dial to the red zone, 2.5 G. The air inside the chamber shimmered as the pressure wave hit. The floor plates whined, a high-pitched mechanical scream signaling that the magnets were pushing their thermal limits. Miller stopped his push-ups. He stood up, shaking out his arms. He didn't crumble. He didn't buckle. Instead, the human took a deep breath, his chest expanding with a biological adaptation that Vrox had completely underestimated. A cardiovascular system evolved to pump sludge against a crushing environment. "Combat Simulation Alpha 9, Vrox commanded. "Active." Holographic hostiles flickered into existence, fast, erratic drones programmed with the speed of a striking viper. Under 2.5 G, these drones were usually a death sentence, moving faster than a heavy worlder's eye could track. Miller moved. He didn't just react. He exploded into motion. It was a blur of violence and precision. The human launched himself off the back foot, covering 5 meters in a single stride despite the crushing weight trying to anchor him. He dismantled the first drone with a kinetic strike that rang like a bell through the observation glass. Vrox watched the telemetry data scroll by in a frantic blur. Miller's bone density was off the charts. His muscle fibers were twitching with an efficiency that defied standard physics. This was the essence of a science fiction story come to life. An apex predator dropped into a petting zoo. The human ducked under a laser suppression beam, rolled, and came up firing a stunning combination of blows that shattered the remaining drones. "Time," the computer chirped. "New course record established." Miller stood amidst the sparking debris of the simulation, looking slightly flushed. He rolled his neck again, that sickening pop echoing over the comms. "Sergeant," Miller called out, his voice steady. That was better. "Good resistance. But can we set it to the difficulty setting you guys use for elite training? I'm still feeling a bit light on my feet. I need something closer to home." Vrox stared at the recruit, then at the smoking gravity generators. Closer to home. He frantically pulled up the deep scan file on the Sol system, ignoring the summarized briefing he had read earlier. He dug into the raw planetary data. He froze. The intelligence report he had relied on was based on atmospheric pressure, not gravitational pull. A catastrophic failure of data integrity. Earth wasn't a 1.1 G world. It was a high-density rock with a molten iron core, pulling at a relentless 9.8 milliars S22. The realization hit Vrox harder than a plasma bolt. The Academy's maximum safety setting, the lethal 2.5 G that shattered avian bones, was only a fraction higher than what this human experienced while sleeping, walking, or carrying groceries. To Miller, this wasn't a torture chamber. It was a brisk morning jog. "Sergeant?" Miller waved a hand. "Is the machine broken again?" Vrox deactivated the field. The hum died down, leaving a ringing silence in the room. He looked at the fragile human, realizing that the galaxy had it backward. They weren't soft. They were containment suits for monsters. "Recruit Miller," Vrox said, his voice losing its growl and taking on a tone of professional respect. "The machine is not broken. It simply lacks the capacity to challenge a Death Worlder." Vrox unlocked the chamber door and walked down to the floor. He towered over the human, but the dynamic had shifted. He was no longer looking at a subordinate. He was looking at the future of the fleet. There will be no more basic training for you, Vrox announced, extending a massive, clawed hand. Report to the command deck at 0800. I need an assistant instructor who understands that gravity is merely a suggestion. Welcome to the Space Orcs, kid, Miller grinned, gripping the alien's hand with a force that made Vrox's exoskeleton creak. Happy to help, Sergeant. HFY, right? I have no idea what that means, Vrox lied. But yes, absolutely.